Daniel was a young and humble mailman. Every morning, before the sun touched the rooftops of Copper Hill, he'd pull on his faded blue uniform, sling his leather bag across his shoulder, and start his route. He'd been delivering mail there for years. He knew the creak of every gate, the bark of every dog, and the smiles of the people who waved from their porches. But there was one house he looked forward to more than any other, Mrs. Harlan's. She was an elderly woman, kind and soft-spoken, with a garden full of roses that always seemed to bloom brighter than the rest. She'd wave at him from her porch with a teacup in hand and say, "Morning, Daniel. You work too hard. Have a cookie before you go." And he always did. Her house was spotless, her yard trimmed, her flowers neat, a picture of peace and care. But one morning, everything changed. The grass was knee-high. The flowers were withering. Old newspapers were scattered across the porch like forgotten memories. And the mailbox, it was overflowing with letters and flyers. Daniel froze. He hadn't seen her in weeks. Something felt wrong. He knocked on the door. No answer. He waited. Knocked again. Still nothing. He left a note in the mailbox. "Just checking in on you, Mrs. Harlan." Daniel. He started to walk away. But halfway down the path he stopped. That uneasy feeling wouldn't leave him. He turned to the house next door, where old Mr. Reed was raking leaves. "Hey, Mr. Reed, have you seen Mrs. Harlan lately?" The man frowned. "Not for about 2 weeks, son." "Strange, isn't it?" Daniel forced a smile. Maybe she's visiting family. But deep down he knew something wasn't right. At lunch, Daniel sat at his usual spot in Clara's diner. He stared at his sandwich untouched. Clara, the owner, noticed. "What's wrong, Daniel? You look like you've seen a ghost." He sighed. "It's Mrs. Harlan. Something feels off. I haven't seen her in a while, and her place looks abandoned." Clara crossed her arms. "Honey, if your gut says something's wrong, trust it. Go check again." Those words stuck with him. That afternoon, instead of finishing his route, Daniel drove back to her house. As he stepped out of his van, the air hit him, heavy, stale, with a faint, unpleasant odor. He knocked again, calling softly, "Mrs. Harlan? It's Daniel, your mailman." A few seconds passed. Then a sound. The slow creak of the door. She stood there, but not like before. Her hair was tangled, her face pale and thin, her clothes wrinkled and stained. Her eyes, once bright and welcoming, looked lost. "Mrs. Harlan," he said gently, "are you all right?" She forced a shaky smile. "Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just tired." But the smell from inside told another story. Through the crack in the door, he saw piles of trash, scattered food containers, and medical supplies everywhere. It looked nothing like the tidy home he remembered. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to help, but he didn't want to intrude. So he nodded. "All right, ma'am. You take care. Okay?" Then he stepped back, watching her close the door slowly. He sat in his van for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. Should he call the police? Maybe she was sick. Maybe she just needed rest. But what if she was dying in there? He remembered her cookies, her kindness, her laughter on the porch. And that decided it. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. 2 officers and an ambulance arrived. Daniel stood back as they knocked, called out, then forced the door open. A shout came from inside. "Get the medics in here." Daniel's chest tightened. He waited by the mailbox, praying she'd be okay. Moments later, paramedics rolled Mrs. Harlan out on a stretcher. She was pale, barely breathing, an oxygen mask over her face. A police officer approached him. "You the one who called?" Daniel nodded, his throat dry. The officer sighed. "You saved her life, son. She's a cancer patient. Lives alone. Severe dehydration and malnutrition. Another day or two, and she might not have made it." Daniel's eyes stung. He had passed that house every day, and never realized she was suffering inside. He visited her at the hospital that evening. The doctor told him she was in critical condition, but his quick call had given her a chance. When she finally woke up, She turned her head slowly. Her voice was weak. "Daniel." He took her hand. "You're safe now, Mrs. Harlan. We've got you." Over the next few days, Daniel kept visiting after work. He brought her flowers from her own garden, the few that had survived. And every day she grew a little stronger. But one afternoon, she whispered sadly, "I don't know how I'll pay for all this. I don't have enough insurance. I don't want to be a burden." Daniel shook his head. "You're not a burden. You're family." That night, he came up with an idea. The next morning, Clara's diner had a jar on the counter. A handwritten note that said, "Help Mrs. Harlan get home." Mr. Reed told every neighbor on the street. Soon, people started donating coins, bills, groceries, even home-cooked meals. In just a few weeks, the entire community had come together. Daniel could hardly believe it. For once, everyone was united, not by tragedy, but by kindness. When Mrs. Harlan finally returned home, the sun was shining bright. Her porch had been cleaned, her lawn trimmed, her garden replanted. Neighbors gathered with balloons, flowers, and cookies. As the ambulance doors opened, she looked around in awe. Tears filled her eyes. "You all did this?" Daniel smiled. "We missed you, Mrs. Harlan." She gripped his hand as he helped her up the steps. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already have," he said softly. From that day, Daniel still delivered mail every morning, but he always lingered a little longer at her door. Sometimes she'd wave from the porch with her teacup again, and he'd wave back, smiling. Weeks passed. The garden bloomed again, bright and full of color. One sunny afternoon, Daniel found her sitting on the porch, sunlight dancing on her silver hair. "The flowers are finally blooming again," she said with a gentle smile. Daniel nodded. "That's because of you." She shook her head. "No, Daniel, that's because of you. You didn't just save my life," she whispered. "You reminded me what it means to have a friend." He smiled, his eyes warm. "And you reminded me why I do what I do." From that day on, Daniel was no longer just a mailman. He was part of something bigger, a thread of kindness tying the whole neighborhood together. The once quiet house was now full of laughter, cookies, and the scent of blooming roses. And every time he walked down that street, he'd see her waving from the porch, a living reminder that one small act of care can change, and even save, a life.